Okay, I saw this article purely by accident, and I clicked it to see which ones they shouted out, and went through it and did a face palm. By the way, it's 11:30. It's the 21st day of June. It is 64 degrees and hazy here at Site B. This is according to the Gamer magazine, Online 3. It's from Matthew Cochran. It was written 2 days ago. The best fantasy tabletop role-playing game systems that aren't Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, well, let's see. We've got Warhammer, Call of Cthulhu, and Star Wars. None of which are fantasy role-playing games. Okay, moving on. Yeah, if you're going to pick pictures to draw people's attention to the fact you're talking about systems that aren't Dungeons and Dragons in relations to fantasy, these three pictures truly embody fantasy. No, they do not. Okay, so already, let's go. I mean, is it that hard to have the AI find three pictures of fantasy? Further proof that perhaps they don't actually play. All right, tabletop role-playing game number 1, fantasy system that's good as, if not better than, Dungeons and Dragons. Stars Without Number. Not a fantasy system. A great system. One of the best space systems out there. Not a fantasy system. Again, best fantasy tabletop role-playing game systems that aren't D&D. Number 2, Pathfinder. Okay, yes, not D&D. Pretty much close to D&D. I mean, it is D&D. It's what D&D would have been if they continued with the 3-point system and didn't switch to 4th. So, yeah. Call of Cthulhu. Not a fantasy system. One of the best role-playing game systems on the market, if not the best role-playing game system on the market, but not a fantasy system. Not that you couldn't do fantasy Call of Cthulhu, but it's not a fantasy system. GURPS, a system that is near and dear to my heart. Again, not a fantasy system. It's literally in the name. Generic universal role-playing system. It's a generic system. You can use it to play fantasy. There is a large library of GURPS fantasy novels, but there's also GURPS Supers, GURPS Time Travel, GURPS Science Fiction, GURPS Space, you name it, there's a GURPS edition to it. So not a fantasy system. Monster of the Week, a system designed to replicate Buffy the Vampire Slayer and other, Monster of the Week type shows. Not a fantasy system. Again, not to say that Buffy the Vampire Slayer couldn't be considered fantastical, but it is not a fantasy system, and it definitely doesn't emulate Dungeons and Dragons. Star Wars, Fantasy Flight Games version, the second best version. Well, I mean, there's some argument. I think we all generally agree 99% that the West End game Star Wars was the best. And then there's some argument that the D20 Star Wars was the second best, or the Fantasy Flight Games version is the second best. I would probably go the D20 version over Fantasy Flight Games just because it doesn't require buying weird dice. But other than that, I think the Fantasy Flight Games one has done a really good job with the franchise, or as best as they can. But again, not Dungeons and Dragons. Cyberpunk Red, as far away from Dungeons and Dragons as you can possibly get. I mean, every other system you've said has fantastical elements. Fantasy Flight Games, Star Wars. Star Wars is fantasy in space. Monster of the Week has magic. GURPS has magic, has fantastical systems. Even Call of Cthulhu has fantastical qualities to it. Pathfinder, obviously. And Stars Without Number, well, I mean, it has... No, I mean, yeah. But, I mean... If there's, you can't get as far away from D&D as Cyberpunk Red. I don't think you can get any farther. Warhammer 40K. Well, technically, I guess there's fantastical elements, but it's not a Dungeons and Dragons system. It's a space system. Morkborg. Again, Morkborg is a fantastical system. I mean, it does have magic and fantastical creatures, but I mean, it's more of a joke. At this point, I think, with the very Dark Souls, doom and gloom, let's take the whole doom and gloom dark, grim, and turn it up to 11. But again, okay, that's pretty close. Apocalypse World, or Powered by the Apocalypse, which is a post-apocalyptic setting using Powered by the Apocalypse. It was the first system that used Powered by the Apocalypse. Again, not a Dungeons and Dragons, not even a fantasy system. So if we're going by best systems that recreate the Dungeons and Dragons feeling that aren't D&D, best fantasy systems, first off, none of these emulate fantasy. No. Yes. No. Sort of. No. No. Definitely not. It's iffy. Yes. No. As our friends over at Nerd Cognito like to say, they don't even play. So they gave whoever this guy was just a stack of role-playing games and said, okay, which one of these is the best? And please find a way to tag Dungeons and Dragons onto the list to make it sell more or make us look completely unreliable. Because there are plenty of fantasy systems out there, guys, that are as good, if not better, than Dungeons and Dragons. And there are plenty of D20 systems that are as good, if not better, than Dungeons and Dragons, depending upon which version of Dungeons and Dragons you're talking about. There are plenty of D6 systems, percentile systems, D4, D8, D10, D12, D20, D2D20s. There are hundreds of fantasy systems out there, every language in the world, all trying to emulate that Hollywood medieval in some form or another, you know, knights and wizards and rogues against the world. So, including mine and SHADOWDARK. So you had a plethora. I love fitting plethora into a conversation as many times as I can. You had a plethora of systems across the world that all are fantasy, that you could have stacked up and said, these do the same job. Some of them do the job better. If we're going by 2024 Dungeons and Dragons, everyone does the job better. But yeah, so Stars Without Number, unbelievably good system. One of, if not the best. I mean, the stuff that he's made is amazing. Not Dungeons and Dragons. Pathfinder, perfect. Perfect. You can't get a better, this is Dungeons and Dragons as it should have been, than Pathfinder First Edition. Pathfinder Second Edition, not so much, but Pathfinder First Edition, especially in the beginning, as close to perfect as you could get for carrying on that 3-point feel. Call of Cthulhu, not even close. GURPS, definitely, because it's generic, so you could run GURPS fantasy. Monster of the Week, not even close. Star Wars, not even close. Cyberpunk Red, as far away from Dungeons and Dragons as you could possibly get. Warhammer 40K, as far away from Dungeons and Dragons as you could possibly get by going into space. Morkborg, yes. It definitely is Dungeons and Dragons. If Dungeons and Dragons was like, let's take everything that is miserable, mudcore, grimdark, and turn that all up to 11 as a tongue-in-cheek, the most grimdark campaign setting you could ever get. And Apocalypse World, not even close. They don't really play. They don't really play. Oh, OGGM, what do you think are the best systems that aren't Dungeons and Dragons? SHADOWDARK, Castles and Crusade, Dungeon Crawl Classic would be the top 3. Yeah, pretty much those. Dragonbane would be number 4, probably. Yeah. So those would probably be my top 4, you know, or just taking the basic role-playing system from Call of Cthulhu and running their fantasy world system. So Pendragon. Yeah, Pendragon would be on the list too. So those would be mine. What are yours? What are your best fantasy systems that aren't? By the way, the guy who made Stars Without Numbers made a fantasy system as well. It's called Worlds Without Numbers. And it's an amazing fantasy system. So yeah, he's done Stars Without Numbers, which was space, World Without Numbers, which was fantasy, Cities Without Numbers, which was cyberpunk. So I think he's doing Apocalypse Without Numbers for post-apocalypse. So the only thing he hasn't done is maybe superheroes. Could you imagine Kevin Crawford doing superheroes? Oh my God. If he put half the amount of work, it would be amazing. If you ever think about doing superheroes, Kevin Crawford, reach out to me because I'd love to work on Heroes Without Numbers. But yeah, there are so many systems out there that are as good, if not better, than Dungeons and Dragons that aren't D20 Wizards of the Coast. I don't know how you got only 2 of the many on the list. But bonus points for GURPS and Apocalypse World because they're both generic systems. So yeah. This is the world we live in. They don't really play. They don't really play.
Roll the dice and ride the wave. Quest and dragons, the news we crave. Under neon lights we take a stand. Knights and wizards